The rain battered Chicago's streets like a scorned lover's fists, relentless and cold. The night I found out Julian had left, I stood in our apartment, his apartment now, I suppose, clutching a crumpled note that read, "I can't do this anymore, Ethan. I'm sorry. 3 years of promises, late-night talks, and shared dreams, gone in 7 words." I was 27, a graphic designer with a knack for overthinking, and Julian had been my anchor. We'd met at a Lakeview art gallery, his sharp wit and easy charm pulling me in like gravity. He was older, 32, a lawyer with a smile that could disarm anyone. But that night, as I stood alone in the dim glow of my apartment, I felt the weight of his absence like a physical wound. The note wasn't even in his handwriting. He'd typed it, like I was a client he was firing. I sank to the floor, the city's hum outside mocking my silence. The weeks that followed were a blur of takeout boxes and unanswered texts. Friends tried to help. Naomi, my best friend since college, dragged me to karaoke bars, insisting I sing the pain away. But every note felt hollow. I'd built my world around Julian, and without him, I was untethered, drifting through Chicago's crowded streets like a ghost. My work suffered. Clients noticed my designs lacked their usual spark. I stopped going to our favorite diner on Clark Street, afraid I'd see him there with someone new. The betrayal wasn't just that he left. It was how he'd erased me, like I'd never mattered. One bitter February morning, I forced myself out of the apartment. The air was sharp, stinging my cheeks as I wandered into a small cafe in Andersonville, a neighborhood I rarely visited. The place was warm, with mismatched furniture and the smell of fresh coffee. I ordered a latte and sank into a corner booth, sketching aimlessly on my tablet to drown out the ache in my chest. That's when I noticed him, Elliot. He was behind the counter, maybe 28, with curly black hair and a laugh that carried across the room. He was joking with a customer, his hands moving animatedly as he described a pastry like it was a work of art. His energy was magnetic, pulling my gaze despite my best efforts to stay buried in my work. When he caught me staring, he grinned. Not a polite, customer service smile, but something real, like he'd seen something in me I didn't even know was there. "Hey, you're hogging the best booth," he called out, wiping his hands on his apron. His voice was warm, teasing, and I felt my face flush. "Sorry?" I mumbled, scrambling to pack up my things. "I'll move." "Nah, stay," he said, walking over. "Just wanted an excuse to talk to you. I'm Elliot." He extended a hand, and I noticed a small rainbow pin on his apron. It was subtle, but it sent a jolt through me, a reminder of a community I'd been avoiding since Julian. "Ethan," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, his eyes kind but searching. I wasn't ready for this, for anyone, but something about him made me linger. Over the next hour, we talked. He asked about my sketches, and I learned he was an aspiring playwright, working at the cafe to pay the bills. His passion for storytelling was infectious, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of something, hope, maybe. But as I left the cafe, promising to return, guilt clawed at me. Julian's shadow still loomed, and I wasn't sure I could let anyone in again. That night, I lay awake, replaying our conversation. Elliot's laugh, his easy confidence, the way he'd listened when I mentioned my work. It all felt like a lifeline I was too scared to grab. I didn't know then that he'd become the one to pull me out of the darkness Julian left behind. The next week, I went back to the cafe, telling myself it was just for the coffee. But when Elliot saw me, his face lit up, and I knew I was lying to myself. He slid into the booth across from me during his break, a plate of scones between us. "You're back," he said, like it was a victory. Couldn't resist the scones? I joked, and he laughed, the sound easing the knot in my chest. We talked about everything, his latest play, my latest design project, the way Chicago's winters made us both question our life choices. He was open about being gay, sharing stories of his coming out in a small Ohio town, the rejection he'd faced, and the freedom he'd found in the city. I envied his resilience, his ability to wear his truth so openly. I hadn't told him about Julian, not yet. The wound was too raw, and I wasn't ready to admit how deeply it had cut me. But Elliot was patient. He didn't push, didn't pry, just kept showing up in my life like a warm breeze cutting through the cold. We started meeting outside the cafe, grabbing tacos and Pilsen, wandering through Millennium Park, debating the best deep dish pizza. Each moment with him chipped away at the walls I'd built, but Julian's betrayal still haunted me. I catch myself pulling back, afraid to trust again. One evening, as we walked along the lakefront trail, the city skyline glittering against the dusk, Elliot stopped and turned to me. "You don't talk about your past much," he said, not accusing, just curious. "But I get the feeling someone hurt you. Bad." I froze, the wind off Lake Michigan biting at my skin. I wanted to tell him, to spill everything about Julian. The late nights, the promises, the way he'd left without a goodbye. But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded, my eyes on the horizon. Elliot didn't press. He just took my hand, his fingers warm against mine, and said, "Whoever it was, they don't get to define you." His touch was steady, grounding, and for the first time, I let myself believe I could heal. Spring crept into Chicago, softening the city's edges with bursts of green and warmer days. My time with Elliot became the rhythm of my life. Coffee dates at the cafe, late-night walks, and quiet moments where we'd sit in his tiny uptown apartment, him scribbling lines for his play while I sketched. But Julian's ghost lingered, a shadow that darkened every step I took towards something new. One Saturday, Elliot invited me to a reading of his latest play at a small theater in Wicker Park. The space was cramped, with folding chairs and a stage barely big enough for the actors. I sat in the front row, nervous for him, my hands fidgeting with the program. The play was about a young man navigating love in a world that didn't always accept him. And as the actors brought Elliot's words to life, I felt exposed, like he'd written pieces of me into the script without knowing it. After the reading, we grabbed drinks at a nearby bar. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and laughter, and Elliot was buzzing with adrenaline. "What did you think?" he asked, leaning close, his eyes searching mine. "It was raw," I said, struggling to find words. "It felt real, like you've lived it." He nodded, his expression softening. "I have. Not all of it, but enough." He paused, then added, "I saw you in the audience, Ethan. You looked like you were carrying something heavy." His words hit hard, and I stared into my beer, the noise of the bar fading. I hadn't told him about Julian, but Elliot saw through me in a way that both scared and comforted me. "I'm trying to let it go," I admitted, my voice low. "But it's not easy." He reached across the table, his hand resting on mine. "You don't have to tell me until you're ready. But I'm here." That night, as we walked back to his place, I told him. The words spilled out. Julian's charm, our life together, the way he'd left without warning. I told him about the note, the typed apology that felt like a slap, and the months I'd spent trying to piece myself back together. Elliot listened, his face a mix of empathy and quiet anger, not at me but at the pain I'd carried. When I finished, he stopped walking and pulled me into a hug. His arms were strong, his heartbeat steady against mine. "You're more than what he did to you," he whispered. "You're allowed to be happy again." I wanted to believe him, but fear held me back. What if I let Elliot in and he left too? What if I wasn't enough? Again. Over the next few weeks, our connection deepened. Elliot invited me to meet his friends, a tight-knit group of artists and dreamers who welcomed me like family. At a rooftop party in Logan Square, I watched him dance under string lights, his laughter cutting through the music. He was so alive, so unapologetically himself, and I envied that freedom. But I also felt it pulling me in, urging me to let go of the past. One night, as we sat on his couch, a half-empty pizza box between us, he turned to me, his eyes serious. "Ethan, I like you. A lot. But I need to know you're in this, not just passing through." His honesty caught me off guard. I wanted to say I was ready, that I could give him everything, but Julian's betrayal still whispered doubts in my mind. "I want to be," I said finally, "but I'm scared." He nodded, his hand finding mine. "That's okay. We'll figure it out together." The next day, I found a photo of Julian on my phone, one I hadn't deleted. We were at Navy Pier, his arm around me, both of us laughing. I stared at it, my chest tight, then deleted it. It wasn't closure, not yet, but it was a start. Summer arrived, painting Chicago in vibrant hues. Elliot and I were inseparable, our days filled with rooftop barbecues, bike rides along the lake, and quiet nights in his apartment, where we'd talk until the city grew quiet. But the closer we got, the more I felt Julian's shadow creeping back, testing my resolve. One humid July evening, I ran into Julian at a farmer's market in Lincoln Park. He was there with someone new, a man with sharp cheekbones and an easy smile. My stomach twisted as I watched them, Julian's hand resting casually on the man's back, the way it used to rest on mine. He saw me, and for a moment our eyes locked. Then he turned away, like I was a stranger. I left the market, my heart pounding, and called Elliot. He met me at a park bench near the lake, his face etched with concern. "What happened?" he asked, sitting close. I told him about Julian, the encounter, the way it had unraveled me. "I thought I was over him," I said, my voice breaking, but seeing him, it brought it all back. Elliot listened, his hand steady on my knee. "It's okay to feel this," he said, "but he's not your story anymore. You get to write a new one." His words were a lifeline, but doubt gnawed at me. Was I ready to let go, to fully trust Elliot? That night, as we lay in his bed, the city's hum filtering through the open window, I kissed him. It was slow, deliberate, a promise I wasn't sure I could keep but wanted to try. The next week, Elliot invited me to a pride event in Boys Town. The streets were alive with color, music, and people celebrating who they were. I'd avoided pride since Julian, the memories too painful, but Elliot's excitement was contagious. He wore a rainbow bandana, his eyes bright as he pulled me through the crowd, introducing me to activists and performers. On a float passing by, a banner read, "Love is love, always," in bold blue letters, echoing the napkin from our first meeting. I squeezed his hand, my heart swelling. But the past wasn't done with me. A few days later, Julian texted, "Can we talk?" It read, simple and devastating. I stared at the screen, my pulse racing. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to protect the fragile happiness I'd found with Elliot. But another part needed answers. I met Julian at a quiet diner in Edgewater. He looked tired, his usual polish faded. "I messed up," he said, his voice low. "I didn't realize what I had until it was gone." His words were everything I'd wanted to hear months ago, but now they felt hollow. "Why now?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I saw you at the market," he admitted. "You looked happy." It made me realize what I lost. I wanted to be angry, to lash out, but all I felt was pity. "You don't get to do this," I said. "You left. I'm building something new." As I walked away, the weight of Julian's betrayal lifted slightly, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I called Elliot, and when he answered, his voice was a bomb. "Can I see you?" I asked. "Always," he said, and I smiled, knowing I was ready to choose him. Fall painted Chicago in fiery reds and golds, and with it came a shift in me. My meeting with Julian had been a reckoning, a chance to close a chapter I'd left open too long. Elliot was my present, my future, and I was determined to show him I was all in. We spent a crisp October weekend at a cabin in Wisconsin, a gift from Naomi to get me out of my head. The air was sharp, the lake outside our window a mirror of the sky. Elliot and I cooked terrible pancakes, laughed until we couldn't breathe, and made love under a quilt as the fire crackled. It was the first time I felt truly free, unburdened by Julian's ghost. But life has a way of testing resolve. Back in Chicago, Elliot got a call from a theater in New York. A director loved his play and wanted him to workshop it there for a month. It was a dream opportunity, but the thought of him leaving, even temporarily, sent a familiar panic through me. "You're going, right?" I asked, trying to sound supportive as we sat in his apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes. He hesitated, his eyes searching mine. "I want to, but I don't want to lose this. Us." "You won't," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm not going anywhere." But as he prepared to leave, old fears resurfaced. What if distance broke us? What if he found someone else in New York? I confided in Naomi, who rolled her eyes and said, "Ethan, he's not Julian. Stop punishing him for someone else's mistakes." She was right, but it didn't stop the ache when I dropped Elliot off at O'Hare. His kiss lingered on my lips as I watched him disappear into the terminal, promising to call every day. The first week without him was hard. Chicago felt emptier, the cafe where we'd met a reminder of his absence. I threw myself into work, designing a campaign for a local nonprofit supporting LGBTQ youth. The project gave me purpose, a way to channel my energy, but every night, I counted down the hours until Elliot's call. When he did call, his voice was a lifeline. He told me about New York, the chaos of rehearsals, the thrill of seeing his words on a bigger stage. But he also talked about missing me, about wanting me there. One night, he said, "I'm coming back to you, Ethan. You're my home." His words broke something open in me, a trust one hadn't realized I was withholding. I started planning a surprise for his return, a mural in his apartment, a vibrant design of Chicago's skyline with a rainbow woven into the clouds, a nod to the banner we'd seen at Pride. It was my way of saying I was ready fully for us. When Elliot came back, the moment he saw the mural, his eyes filled with tears. "You did this for me?" he asked, pulling me close. "For us?" I said, and kissed him, the city outside humming with possibility. Winter settled over Chicago, blanketing the city in snow and quiet. Elliot was back, his play a success, and our life together felt like a new beginning. We moved in together, merging our worlds in a cozy apartment in Ravenswood. His scripts littered the coffee table, my sketchpads stacked beside them, a testament to the life we were building. But healing isn't linear. One night, as we decorated a small Christmas tree, I found a box of old photos in the closet. Pictures of me and Julian, tucked away but not forgotten. Elliot noticed my silence, the way my hands shook as I shoved the box back. "Talk to me," he said, his voice gentle but firm. I told him about the photos, the memories they stirred. I don't miss him, I said, but I'm scared I'll never fully let go. Elliot took my hand, leading me to the couch. You don't have to erase him, he said. He's part of your story. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. His words were a gift, a permission to carry my past without letting it define me. We burned the photos in the fireplace, not out of anger but as a release, the flames curling around Julian's face until he was gone. As spring approached, Elliot's play was picked up for a full production in Chicago. The night of the premiere, I sat in the audience, my heart swelling with pride. The story was different now, richer, with a new character inspired by me, a man learning to love again after loss. When the lights dimmed and the crowd applauded, I found Elliot backstage, pulling him into a kiss that said everything I couldn't. But life threw one last test. Julian called again, this time leaving a voicemail. I'm moving away, he said. I just wanted to say goodbye. I didn't call back. Instead, I played the message for Elliot, then deleted it. He's not my story anymore, I said, and meant it. By summer, Chicago felt like home again, not because of the city but because of Elliot. We'd built something real, something stronger than the pain Julian left behind. On our one-year anniversary, we returned to the cafe where we'd met, the same booth where he'd teased me about hogging the best seat. As we sat, sharing a latte, Elliot slid a napkin across the table. On it, in his messy handwriting, were the words, "Love is love, always." Below it, he'd added, "Marry me?" My breath caught, tears prickling my eyes. I thought of the journey we'd taken, the doubts, the fears, the moments of joy that had stitched me back together. Julian had wounded me, but Elliot had shown me a love I never expected, one that was patient, fierce, and true. Yes, I said, my voice breaking as I pulled him into a kiss. The cafe erupted in cheers, strangers joining our joy, and I knew I'd found my place, not just in Chicago, but with him. Years later, as we stood in our home, now filled with art and memories, I realized the truth. Love doesn't erase the past, but it can redefine it. Julian's leaving had broken me, but Elliot's love had made me whole. And in that wholeness, I found a life I never dared to dream of, a life where love was enough.